Hey guys, this is Makanor. Let's talk about mythology and folklore and kin types. Basically, in my opinion, I believe that a lot of folklore and mythology has a basis or foundation of truth to it. There's always a grain of truth to it, in my opinion. The reason I believe this is because a lot of stories and accounts, when it comes to folklore and mythology, tend to talk about certain creatures and they tend to match. And it doesn't matter which region or culture or tribe or group of people that this story or account comes from, they all tend to have matching characteristics and behavior. And I know a lot of people would argue that maybe would argue that maybe these stories and accounts were told from one group of people to the next and it spread across the world. But my argument against that is you have isolated tribes and isolated groups of people that have never interacted with any other group of people, never interacted with anyone else from the outside world for centuries. So how could their stories and accounts match up with the rest of the world? How would they know that such and such creature acts a certain way unless they've seen it, unless they've actually seen it, observed it, or encountered it? Which makes me skeptical. But here's my example of mythology and folklore meeting with reality, or having some type of foundation in truth. Now, if you've ever heard of the Ebu Gogo, then you know where I'm going. But if you haven't heard of the Ebu Gogo, then sit down, you're going to be in for some education. The Ebu Gogo is a short humanoid creature in Indonesian mythology, and Flores, Indonesia. Now, the Nage people believe that the Ebu Gogo survived up until the 17th century, which is pretty darn recent. An even smaller group of people believe that the Ebu Gogo survived up until the 20th century, which is even more recent. Now, some people probably roll their eyes and say, well, the Ebu Gogo doesn't exist, so too bad. Well, in 2003, in Flores, Indonesia, they found skeletal remains of a 3.5 foot tall individual. And then they found, I think, 9 more skeletal remains. And after doing some chronological work, they found that the skeletal remains varied from 100,000 years ago to 60,000 years ago. Now, considering the Earth is millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of years old, 60,000 years ago is pretty darn recent. Considering that these specimens basically outlasted Neanderthals. They out-survived Neanderthals. Now, now testing was done, and it was actually considered an extinct species called the Homo floresiensis, or aka hobbits. So, a lot of scholars believe that the Homo floresiensis is probably the basis or the reason, is probably the basis or the creature behind the Ebu Gogo mythology in Flores, Indonesia. And to me, this is a key example of mythology meeting up with reality. Also, in my personal opinion, my theory is this: that in a lot of cases, when it comes to mythology and folklore, these stories are based off of individuals or groups of people or clans or tribes of people that have certain characteristics that are seen as unorthodox or seen as otherworldly or inhuman or superhuman. And back then, there was no explanation for these things. There was no explanation for these characteristics or these genetic traits. So these things had a supernatural or divine label stamped upon it. And another example, but I'm probably grasping at straws with this one, is like divers, especially Ama divers in Japan. Their practice has presumably dated back for over 2,000 years. And they back then used to dive in only loincloths for pearls and oysters and shells. And if you were from any other part of the world, if you didn't know about Ama divers and let's go back like 1300s or 1200s, like if you were back then, you would see that as weird. You would see that as odd for a woman to be diving so deep and far into the ocean in only a loincloth. No scuba gear, no equipment, no air tank, nothing. You just see a woman coming out of the ocean holding pearls in a loincloth, and people don't know how to explain that. People at the time would have found that odd. So it would have been easy to jump to the conclusion that maybe that this woman was a mermaid or some type of female water siren of sorts or something like that. And the even cooler thing is that when it comes to ama diving, the older women can even hold their breath longer than the younger women, which is just amazing. It's amazing what the human body is really capable of. And I really think that I really think that personally when it comes to mythology and folklore, a lot of people back then were marveled at some of the things that some creatures were capable of. But I think that we really tend to take ourselves for granted because I think the human body is capable of such amazing things. I mean, it's odd and contradictory how the human body works. We're so fragile that we can be killed in the most simplest and dumbest of ways. But at the same time, we're so resilient, and sometimes even the most difficult things can't kill us, and sometimes we overcome the most strenuous of tasks. That's what gets me. But also, this boils down to the question at the end of the video: how would that affect you? Like think of this as a hypothetical question. Let's say you, as otherkin, identified. Let's say your kin type was the Ebu Gogo, that short humanoid creature in Indonesian mythology. Let's say you had just found out that they found skeletal remains of this extinct species and that it might be the Ebu Gogo from Indonesian mythology, and that the Ebu Gogo was based off of that extinct species. Would that affect your kin type? Would that affect your perception of it? Would that validate your connection to the Ebu Gogo? Would that invalidate it? This is stuff I would like to ask, and I really think it's important to get into this type of hypothetical thought because for a lot of people that identify as certain types of creatures and humanoid beings from mythology and folklore, it's always that possibility that maybe that there is some basis of truth to it. I know a lot of people to identify as this you have to believe it's real, but also maybe there's some type of truth to it that there is an existing species out there. And since we're physically not that species, wouldn't it be awkward in a sense? But that's just for the comments. Give me your discussions. This is Makanor. Like, comment, subscribe. Bye.